Hello everyone, welcome to this event by Challenging Orthodox Society and Defend Our Education. Because the Society likes to host talks on a variety of topical issues, contentious issues, to encourage critical debate and discussion. This one is on the purpose of education. I'll hand you over to Rosie.
Hi, I'm Rosie. I'll be chairing the event tonight. So just to remind you all that the event is being filmed, so if anyone's got any problems with that, then come and talk to myself or Nikki at the end. I can't see him, or someone wearing a high-vis jacket. So the discussion will focus on the role of university education, and we'll hope to address the role of universities in relation to the economy and jobs market, knowledge production, the civil society and the community, and personal and social development. So to discuss these issues, we have here tonight Dr. Stephen Jones, a senior lecturer in the Institute of Education here at Manchester. Dr. Jones researches international higher education systems. He investigates the student experience from application to graduation and how it is influenced by educational background. Professor Dame Nancy Rothwell, President and Vice-Chancellor of the University of Manchester. She's the first woman to lead the university and is also a founding president of the Society of Biology, a non-executive director of AstraZeneca, and co-chair of the Prime Minister's Council for Science and Technology. We have also Paul Cottrell, who is head of democratic services at University College Union. Paul is responsible for managing the internal democratic decision-making processes of the Union. He has also helped develop educational policy and is committed to working to widen access to education and using education as an engine of social justice. And finally, we have Akala, a mobile award-winning hip-hop artist and founder of the Hip-Hop Shakespeare Company. So Akala uses hip-hop and poetry to talk about class struggle, social conditioning and alienation amongst the disenfranchised. He considers education fundamental to the empowerment of marginalised groups. I'll ask each panellist to talk for 10 minutes before we open up to the floor for discussions and debate at the end. So Dr. Jones, if you would like to start.
Okay, so I'd like to use my 10 minutes to talk briefly about the economic benefits of higher education, the social benefits of higher education. Then I'm going to talk about a little bit about participation, and particularly underrepresented groups within higher education. And I'm also going to touch upon the funding structure for higher education and the new fee regimes. Okay. This is the average graduate premium over your lifetime for going to university. If you're a man, if you're a male graduate, you'll earn on average £168,000 more. If you're a female graduate, you'll earn on average £252,000 more. Once you factor in the cost of actually being at university and the money you lose that you could be earning when you're at university, the figure averages out about £100,000. There's a strong economic case for higher education. Is it equal for all subjects? No, absolutely not. Do medicine and dentistry, you learn a lot more. But for all subjects, there's a positive overall premium. In other words, it's worth your while economically to go to university. I think that argument's been made quite extensively recently, but there are also other arguments for university entry that are maybe less well known. For example, think about some of these social benefits. If you go to university, you will, on average, be more likely to engage with civil engagement, volunteering. You're more likely to vote. You'll trust people more. You'll be more tolerant. You'll be less likely to commit crime. You'll be a better parent. You won't drink so much. You won't smoke so much. You're less likely to be obese. You'll have better mental health, better physical health. And what's more, you'll live longer to enjoy all of these things. These are the side benefits which aren't so much discussed when higher education is discussed in a purely economic model. And that's some of the things I think we need to bear in mind. So one of the things I'm interested in is who goes to university. We know we've got all of these benefits, but the question is who accesses these benefits. There's never been a golden age of equality within higher education, and as you can see, going back 70 years, there's always been a difference, and that gap, although many more people have gone to university in the last 20 or so years, the gap in participation between higher social classes and lower social classes has remained broadly similar. If we look more closely at this over the last 10 years, you can see here I've broken down the data according to the wealthiest quintile, 20% in society, against the poorest quintile. Poorest quintile is the red line at the bottom. And as you can see, it's good news. We've never had more state school people in higher education, and we've never had more people from disadvantaged backgrounds in higher education. It's also worth noticing, though, that the other groups have gone up as well. So participation rates amongst the richest 20% of society, you used to be 50% likely to go to higher education, now you're 60% likely to go to higher education. This participation gap is one that interests me, and it's not all to do with attainment. Obviously, attainment's a big difference. The people in that top 20%, they go to the best schools, they get the best A-level results. But the Sutton Trust, who do a lot of research in this area, they argue that attainment only accounts for about 75% of the difference. And in my research, one of the things I like to look at is what the other 25% of the difference is. What are the other reasons why people who get the grades from less advantaged backgrounds don't end up at university, and particularly don't end up at the top universities? I'm interested in research by Vicky Bolivar at Durham University. She says that state school pupils need to be better qualified than their private school counterparts, on average by as much as 2 A-level grades before they're as likely to apply to a Russell Group university. So they're disinclined to apply, and possibly more worrying, when they do apply, they need to be better qualified on average by 1 grade at A-level before they're as likely to receive an offer of admissions. So there are issues to do with who applies and who gets in when they do apply. One of the things that makes this even more interesting, as you may have spotted at the weekend, is evidence, really reliable long-term evidence that shows once you get to university, those from state schools actually outperform those from independent schools. So you can see along the bottom axis here all the different grades you might enter university with. The red line is how well you'll perform if you're from a state school. The black line is how well you'll perform if you're from an independent school. In terms of performance, I mean your likelihood of getting a 2-1 or a first-class honours degree. What this suggests is that maybe advantages of schooling can actually mask A-level results. So why don't people apply? Well, we've got the old reason that Diane Ray spotted almost 2 decades ago, that some students just feel disaffected towards university. Some students from less advantaged backgrounds don't feel it's a kind of place they belong. So there's a participant in Diane Ray's study that says, what's a person like me going to do at a place like that? And more recently, I've collected data locally, and here's what some of the people say. They say, I probably won't go, I don't think I'd fit in. These are students who've got the predicted grades to get into university, but say it's not for the likes of me. Interestingly, they don't always understand the language that we speak. So when we talk about bursaries and we say, come onto campus, pick up a prospectus, we may as well be talking another language. Only one of 198 people that I interviewed at a local school in Manchester understood what the word bursary meant. They're only 14 and 15-year-olds. They didn't necessarily need to understand, but that maybe shows that we're not always speaking the right language. And once one of those young people asked me, I don't get why it's gone up so much. What are you getting now that you didn't used to get? We were talking about the rise from 3,000 to 9,000. And we've really not communicated as a sector everything as well as we might have done. There are also reasons to do with our admissions process. And I've done quite a lot of research into the admissions process for universities, and particularly the focus on non-academic indicators like the personal statement. And there's a theory that we should look at non-academic indicators because they allow us to assess applicants holistically. They allow students to sell themselves. But in fact, we're quite unusual compared to other admission systems around the world in giving 16 and 17-year-old young people a piece of paper and saying, write all about yourself, and expecting them not to cheat. Most of them get help. Because they get help, this led to headlines about contacts and social connections allowing some students to get the best university places. And in the data I looked at, I found that comprehensive school applicants and sixth form college applicants were about 3 or 4 times as likely to make very basic spelling mistakes in their application. It wasn't because they were worse students, because they controlled for their A-level grades. The reason was probably more to do with the kind of advice that they received. Moving on to the fee system and the marketised fee system that we now have, at the moment students are required to pay 9% of their income that they receive over £21,000 towards the cost of their education. And when you represent that on a graph, and I show this to students in WP talks, it looks like a very slim line, and it looks quite progressive because it gets more the more that people earn. When you look a bit more closely, because of the way in which the repayments are structured, it can actually be a little bit more regressive. So the assumptions on the graph that I'm showing you now are based on someone who borrows about £40,000. Total repayments, if their annual starting salary is about £35,000 to £40,000, which is about average for a graduate, add up to over £100,000. But if they earn more, they actually end up paying less. So in terms of tax, it's not as progressive as it might be. And there's now some talk of a graduate tax to replace the system, which really can't last for long, because as you may also have read, the RAB, that's a resource allocation budget, that's a bit the government needs to put aside in order to cover for people who can't afford to pay because they don't meet the minimum repayment threshold. That's getting so high that the new system is actually going to be more expensive than the one that it replaced. What does all this do to you as students? Well, one of the things that I'm interested in and that we need to know more about is your role as students in a more marketised system and whether you identify more as consumers. This caught my eye a couple of weeks ago. At an American university, someone had a campaign called Think Before You Ink, pointing out that the cost of a printer each month is equivalent to 4,000 tacos or 1,000 gallons of gas. Someone wrote underneath, with my tuition fees, I could pay for 40,000 tacos, 10,000 gallons of gas, or 465 tickets to Disney World. I think one of the things that we have to do is adapt to this new landscape, because we need to think and realise that maybe the marketised system places you in a different relationship to us than that which we traditionally assumed. One final graph that I'm going to show you before I hand over. And this is a graph which compares the UK system of higher education funding to that in the rest of the world. The blue line, the dark blue line, is the amount of private expenditure that goes into higher education. The light blue line is the amount of public expenditure. The first thing you'll probably notice is that we're down towards the right-hand side of this graph. So in total, we're not as well funded as other competitive countries. And the other thing you'll notice is the dark blue line is very heavy and the light blue line is very light. In other words, our public expenditure on higher education is much less than most of our competitor countries. These figures come from 2010. They're from the UK, so they include Scotland and Ireland, where proportionally, in terms of GDP, more is spent. And they also are pre-higher fees. So now that blue line would be even bigger. So we live in a context where there isn't much public funding for higher education. We also live in a society where there isn't a great deal of fairness and equity in pre-18 educational systems. Different people have different opportunities and that results in different outcomes. What can we do as a university? In some ways we can't change the whole system, but I think the main thing that I'd argue we need to do is make sure we're not complicit in making things any worse and doing our best as a socially responsible university to correct as much as we can and to make people aware of the other problems in society. Thanks.
Thank you, Steve. I found that informative and fascinating. I thought I'd begin with a question that was posed at a conference I was at recently, which is, what's a university for? And the best answer I heard was, for public good. We can argue about that and debate it, as we have increasing numbers of private universities, but I think a public university such as this one should aim to be for public good. Obviously, that good can be delivered in a number of different ways, and a very important way in which it's delivered is our graduates. We also impart new knowledge, we undertake scholarship, and we commit to various other activities outside the university. So in thinking about what is the value of a higher education or the purpose of a higher education, I think a fundamental point is that knowledge for its own sake is a hugely beneficial thing for an individual and for society. For the reasons that Steve told you, it's civilizing, but I think just a greater knowledge and a greater understanding is highly beneficial. In many universities such as this one, I would hope that students benefit from learning in a research-intensive environment, where you're not simply told the facts about your discipline, but where you're side by side with people who are researching at the forefront of knowledge in that discipline. And of course, leaving university with a degree, it does give you more earning power. It's a recognition of achievement and attainment. But talking to employers, and we have a large number of employers that we're engaged with in the university, it's interesting to hear that your discipline doesn't matter very much for most future careers. Most employers are much more interested in the sort of programme you've undertaken and the sort of university you've been to, and indeed in some of the activities you've undertaken outside of your academic studies. Of course, that doesn't apply when you are taking a course that is very, very geared towards a profession, medicine, dentistry, engineering, and so on. But those wider skills include communication, problem solving, independence of thought, awareness, team playing. And these are increasingly important components, I think, of university education, and I hope that it's something we can increasingly deliver. Steve highlighted a really important issue about higher education in this country, and that is the participation, and particularly participation according to wealth.